So hello, welcome everybody to the IPDET mini-series on the new global initiative on evaluation. Thanks for joining. My name is Stephanie Krapp, I'm head of program. IPDET is offering a fully virtual program in 2020, which consists of 7 mini-series on different topics. The first ever evaluation hackathon, which took already place in July, and 8 online workshops delivered by our renowned international faculty. More detailed information can be found on our website, ipdet.org. So this is the third mini-series, and I would like to introduce you to Brenda Babur. She is moderating this session. Welcome, Brenda. Brenda is manager of the Knowledge Management and Communications Unit of the Independent Evaluation Group, the IEG of the World Bank, and her team contributes to IEG's impact by ensuring insights reach their intended audience, knowledge is accessible, and learning is an integral part of the work program. So let me hand over to Brenda. She will guide us through the next 90 minutes. We are all looking forward to an interesting session, and the screen is all yours, Brenda.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Over the next 90 minutes, we're going to be talking about why countries are demanding stronger monitoring evaluation capacity and how the global M&E community can come together to help address that demand. And we know a global collaboration will only work if it's inclusive. So while we have an exciting group of experts here to share their experiences with you, we also want to hear from you. So please be ready to contribute your ideas and questions. We have Jessica and Matt online. They're going to share links that I'll signal you to for questions for you, as well as the Speak Up apps for us to receive questions from you. So first, let me give you a quick overview of the next 90 minutes and introduce who we have on our panels. Allison Evans is our Director General of Evaluation here at the World Bank Group. She will give opening remarks. And then we're going to have 2 panel discussions. The first on the global need for stronger M&E, and that will be with Hippolina Joseph Charles, who's the Deputy Program Manager of the Strategic Management Unit at the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, and Candice Merkel, the Deputy Director for Clear Anglophone Africa, the Centers for Learning and Evaluation and Results. We'll take your questions for Allison, Hippolina, and Candice, and then we'll have a second panel on how a global partnership might bring together existing functions and new partners to ensure local and global knowledge are used. That second panel will have Stephanie Krapp, who you just heard from IPDET, Program Manager, Rossetti Nabumba, the President of the Board of Directors of the African Evaluation Association, AFREA, and Deputy Head and Technical Monitoring Officer, Agriculture of the Budget Monitoring and Accountability Unit from the Government of Uganda, and Patricia Rogers, the CEO of Better Evaluation. Oscar Garcia will give summary remarks. He's the Director of Independent Evaluation Office at the United Nations Development Program. And then we will stay on the line until 8:30 to answer whatever other questions you may have. But before I turn it over to Allison, we'd like to get your input on how big you think the gap is between the need for stronger monitoring and evaluation and the current global capacity. So Jessica's going to put a link in the chat. Please follow that link and tell us what you think the correct answer is. So what percentage of countries around the world have the data and systems to track the implementation of their national development strategies? So it looks like we're converging with most people thinking it's 35%, but 15% coming a close second. And that's actually correct. the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation published a report in 2019, and they found that only 35% of countries have the data and systems they need to monitor their national development strategies. So that's an indication that 65% of the countries don't. So we're starting to see why we need to do this work. I'd like to turn it over to Allison now to tell us more about why strengthening M&E is important and how a global partnership might help.
Thanks very much, Brenda, and thank you, Stephanie, also. And it is great to be back with the IPDET community and kicking off this third event in the 2020 mini-series. Today, we're focusing on one of the grand challenges of our time that rarely hits the top 10, but remains absolutely foundational. And that's the need for countries to have the capabilities to monitor and evaluate the effects of policy and spending decisions and the impacts on all segments of society, and to engage in open debate about what works, how, and for whom. And this, of course, is actually far from being a new challenge, but major inequities in the availability and the usability of reliable evaluation evidence to inform and improve public policy persist. And these inequities are particularly acute in poorer countries, poorer regions, and FCV settings. All of these inequities are at risk of being made significantly worse by the COVID-19 crisis, as restrictions on data collection and huge funding squeezes eat into already limited capacity, just at the time when many evidence is used in government and elsewhere. In a blog I read recently by John Harle of INASP, he wrote, I think incredibly aptly, if organizations lack the structures for commissioning or evaluating evidence, then decision makers are forced to rely on what they get when they get it, rather than what they need when they need it. I don't think I could have put that better. Some low-income and middle-income countries are further along in their ability to build this capacity, and we have lots to learn from them. Others are really at the beginning. What is clear across all settings is that demand for a longer-term systemic view on closing the M&E gap is high and rising. If COVID presents us with anything, it is an opportunity to build back not just better, but to build back differently. And a crucial way forward to closing the M&E gap globally is to connect the supply side and the demand side for monitoring and evaluation, to pool and coordinate technical and financial resources, to build on successful initiatives and find ways to replicate and go to scale, to share knowledge in the right places at the right time, and to be there for the longer term. Building back differently cannot be met by a single organization, and it needs major coordination. And I think it needs a broad and an inclusive partnership, a global partnership, if you will, of national and local actors, of international organizations, and of the practitioner and professional evaluation community to connect the global demand for and supply of monitoring and evaluation support. By helping to connect supply and demand, to coordinate existing and new initiatives, and to come up with some new and exciting collaborations in the field of M&E, we have a chance to significantly move the needle on the global M&E gap. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today on how we might make this a reality. Back to you, Brenda.
Thanks, Allison. I can't wait to hear what Hippolina and Candace have to say about that need, because it's great to hear from the M&E practitioners, but it's also great to hear from the people in countries. So we're going to start our first panel, and we'll start with a question for Hippolina. For many years, the Caribbean community has developed and promoted an agenda on results-based management within CARICOM, and is now working with the World Bank and CLEAR on expanding RBM in the places you represent. What is your motivation for developing and expanding this work? What do you hope CARICOM will achieve with this initiative over the next 3 to 4 years? And why does it matter? And welcome, since this is my first time seeing you. Welcome, Hippolita.
Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to present here our journey as in the CARICOM Secretariat, the CARICOM community. I would just like to share my screen so I could present a presentation that I have prepared.
We have Matt online, so I think you have just a few minutes. Matt, are you able to help with that?
Okay, so good morning again, everyone. I'm just going to go quickly through my presentation. I'm aware of the time constraints, so I will just go quickly, give an overview of the CARICOM community, the development of the CARICOM, the strategic plan, the CARICOM results-based management system, and how we see ourselves in terms of M&E and evaluation in the region. I do not have a successful story about evaluation or M&E, but I have our experience and our journey towards achieving this. The CARICOM community started in 1958, where we had what we called the British West Indies Federation. In 1965, we evolved into the Caribbean Free Trade Agreement, and then in 1973, we established the CARICOM community. It is made up of 15 member states and 5 associate states. We have a number of regional institutions, functional cooperation institutions, community institutions, as well as associate institutions. Now, the mandate of CARICOM, as just before I go into the mandate, just to say that, to give an overview of the Caribbean community. So the Secretariat is located in Georgetown, Guyana, and we have a staff of approximately 300. We also have offices in Barbados and in Jamaica. So just a quick preview. We generally have a democratic form of government. The population of CARICOM is 18.5 million. The annual GDP is 83 billion. And the GDP per capita, we're looking at 4.5 thousand. And the language is English, although we have 2 member states, one with the language being Dutch, and the other one, the language being French. Now, in terms of the Caribbean community, our main mandate is to establish the single market and economy, and we have 4 pillars that this is built on. And we're looking at the regional integration movement within the region. So we have economic integration, foreign policy cooperation, human and social development, as well as security. So the single market and economy, we're looking at removing trade barriers and having several benefits within the region in terms of interregional trade in goods and services, harmonization in terms of standards of production, and a number of other mandates that we're trying to achieve. So this in itself is a brief overview of CARICOM. We have a website, caricom.org, so feel free to visit and navigate and find more information on CARICOM. Now, in 2012, our heads of government mandated that we develop a strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan for the community, which would be the first strategic plan for the community. and also to transform the secretariat. Now, I have a few findings there from the environmental scan that was undertaken to inform the development of the strategic plan. And a few areas there just to highlight. It was found that the member states were still recovering from the global economic crisis. There were low levels of technological penetration, weaknesses in air, maritime, and transport. In fact, from the region, it is easier and quicker to get to Miami than it is to get to some of our member states from one to another. We saw that there were increasing incidences in crime. We are so vulnerable to natural disasters and the effects of climate variability. And there were weaknesses in our governance infrastructure, etc. So in terms of the strategic plan, this is the picture that we came up with. So CARICOM was at that point where a lot needed to be done. Then we look at the transition period and then the desired state. So the desired state here is a resilience model that we adopted in terms of the community strategic plan. In terms of implementing it, we have member states, regional institutions, and international development partners. So at that point, I'm aware of the time, we looked at implementing RBM. And these are some of the areas, the situation that existed. But CARICOM became associated with what is called the implementation deficit. And as a result, we decided to implement the CARICOM RBM system. It was very inclusive. We established a CARICOM RBM leadership group, and that included members from the regional institutions as well as member states. We developed our logic model. We developed our performance measurement framework. And this is where we are in terms of the secretariat. Where we want to go right now is to expand the RBM approach across the region. And we want to develop the CARICOM, the national RBM policies in member states. At the moment, we have a model RBM policy that will be supporting our member states to implement. We are supporting our regional institutions to implement RBM. We are supporting our organs and our bodies to implement RBM. These would be ministerial bodies. And then we also have an adaptation guide in order to do so. Now, Jamaica, which is a member state that started implementing RBM about 10 years ago, using their framework, we have developed what we call our national RBM policy framework, an integrated approach, and we have the 4 pillars here. We have the steps and we have the principles on which it will be built. That is simplicity, action learning, flexible method, partnership, accountability, and transparency.
Excuse me, Helena, thank you. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I know that we're on short time. I wonder if you could just quickly tell us, what do you hope this RBM focus will achieve for CARICOM?
Well, we are at the moment developing our community strategic plan, the second one, which is from 2020 to 2030. In the implementation of the first one, we learned a number of lessons. So we are going to apply the RBM system from the beginning of this strategic plan. We are looking at improved data collection, improved monitoring and evaluation. In fact, one of the things we are doing is to ensure that all our projects and programs have built-in M&E systems and plans. We are hoping that we will be able to, in fact, what we have done is we have established a platform, a web platform for reporting on the strategic plan within the RBM framework. So we are looking at improved transparency as well, improved accountability, reporting, having been able to make evidence-based decision-making as well, especially within a context of very limited resources that we have in the region. So we are looking at a complete paradigm shift in terms of the way we work, working smarter, working more efficiently, and being able to collect the relevant data. We have an issue with data poverty in the region. So in terms of the web platform that we have developed, we're looking at being able to systematically collect data on the performance of the strategic plan.
Thank you. I'm sure when we move to questions, there will be more questions from participants for you. But let me just quickly turn to Candace, because I'd like for her also to share some of her experiences. What have you seen in the African context for the demand for evaluation capacity development?
Thank you very much, Brenda. And let me just greet everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. And also let me congratulate the organizers and the IPDET family for this amazing program that you've put together in quite a short time frame. Of course, we all were wished and hoping that we would be able to get together this year once again. But you've done an amazing job to put the virtual program together in a short space of time. So congratulations to you. This question is so rich, Brenda, and so I've tried to whittle it down to 3, points, but I think that the discussion can, of course, expand later. And the first point is what Alison was saying, is that there's been a real shift in terms of a systems approach and moving away from the linearity of thinking about supply and demand. And so when we're talking about strengthening evaluation systems and strengthening capacities, we're now no longer talking about just individual capacities for evaluation. So, the kind of thing that's in the realm of improving people's ability to produce the evidence or to have, an understanding of approaches and methods and tools. And I think there's been a shift in the understanding and thinking amongst all of our partners. In fact, these are the conversations that we're having to say that you can no longer think about strengthening capacities in terms of just a technological or logistical approach to talk about strengthening maybe the bureaucratic machinery, putting the people in place, ensuring that there's a budget allocated to monitoring and evaluation, ensuring that there are people who can do the work. It's now about talking about also what is the enabling environment, because largely when we're talking about evidence is political, and I think we've seen that it's been, all over the media. We've seen that evidence can be used and misused. Of course, we talk about evidence specifically from evaluation or monitoring and evaluation, but even in the broader debates around evidence, what alternative forms of evidence are people using, and how political is it, and how also is it steeped in an ideological perspective around whose evidence matters, what kind of evidence matters, the yearning for certainty around being quite sure on hard science, for example, about things that are could be quite contextual. And so what we're seeing is that it's a mirroring of what's happening, an understanding of what does it mean to have a very strong, robust evaluation system that can produce and use evidence in such a way that it actually improves the lives of people. That has been mirrored now also in terms of evaluation capacity, demand, and supply. So what's been happening in the work that we've been doing is that we've been seeing that, where the demand is for the capacity development, so to speak, it's no longer saying, can you just do training for us? It's a lot more acknowledgement of how can you assist us in the broader enabling environment as well. The appreciation of, a reflective approach to when we look at evidence, not just having it as part of the compliance ritual. And this is also very much steeped in terms of how, it really does depend on how evidence was brought into a country system, for argument's sake. So if it was brought in very much from an accountability and governance and compliance perspective, one would find also in a country context that it's located within an audit function, for argument's sake. And that is, we've seen a shift in that, where it's been taken out of these audit functions to say, no, we don't want to just, train people to be able to go according to a checking or accounting or policing kind of function. We want people to be able to reflect on what does this evidence mean, to be able to make meaning out of the data that's coming, and then saying what is the best route to take, whether it's in policies or, in the microcosm of projects or programs. The shift towards saying that, and I think that the urgency for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals has been part of that shift also in the demand and supply around evaluation capacity development as well. So that's the first point around just the systems approach. The second point I want to raise is that there's this refrain that we use, and we often say that there are not enough good evaluators. Particularly when we're talking about emerging, fragile, and developing economies, we're talking about saying, how do we build capacity? And there's almost a sense that we need to ask ourselves the difficult questions. Is it, and to move away from the unidirectional approach to say that, a certain gaze of expertise or the certain understanding of what expertise means and what capability means will be used to define how capacity development will be taken to people who need it. And we are often looking, when we're working, well, of course, our center, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this to the listeners and the viewers, to say that the center that I work for is one of 6 global centers whose work is actually located in the space of strengthening capacities in terms of the use and the production of evidence, specifically from evaluations, for better decision making, and of course to improve the lives of people, for better development outcomes. And so the work that we've been doing, we've seen that when we work in countries, there's a lot of in-country expertise that can be, I think, shepherded and transitioned into the space that we are so familiar with, what we call about the M&E ecosystem. And we have a lot of really fantastic people who are working in disciplines, as diverse as agriculture or conflict and transformation or health, education, and so forth. And their expertise, we need to be able to find and locate how can that expertise be drawn into this evidence ecosystem, and specifically monitoring and evaluation. And I think there are 2 issues there that we're concerned with. The one is, of course, there's a very real need to strengthen individual capacities for understanding how M&E works and what it is about evaluation that's different from research, for example, and why it is that evaluations are so important for policy making and decision making, and to improve development outcomes. But then the second issue is the issue around inclusivity that I think Alison spoke about, and Brenda, you also mentioned. And what are perhaps the structural or systemic ways in which we are excluding people from transitioning into this, evidence production and use space? And so what are some of the artificial barriers, for example? What are the rules of the game, so to speak, within the international development community that excludes some people from actually entering into the space? So when we talk about young and emerging evaluators, now what are we doing to get rid of and divest ourselves of these boundaries and these barriers that actually prevent us from developing this kind of capacity? So what I'm talking about is really deepening our understanding of what those barriers are, and not having a simple, very linear and blunt approach to say that we just have to provide more training, or presenting some kind of professionalization path or trajectory. There might be other systemic issues that are actually preventing those capacities from being built. I see I have less than a minute left, so in that time I'm just going to mention the last issue, which is basically enforcing the importance of context on building this kind of demand. So for me, it's around how do we build proper collaboration, and how do we partner in countries to be able to understand what the real need and what the demand is. I think it's so easy to define the need and the demand according to what our approaches and methods and tools tell us what a good evaluation system should look like, and what a good evidence production and use system should look like. But there's a temptation to kind of impose it, to say that this is how we're going to shape our training and our capacity building, interventions. But I think that the other hard question for us, for all of us who are working in this space, is how do we collaborate and co-create in the long game in order to ensure that we build in-country, the demand and supply of evidence, production and use gets truly built in country, and there's no parachuting from outside, in to say we are the experts, we are going to show you how your evidence system should look. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you, Candace. And it sounds like a really big task ahead of us to build that evidence ecosystem. And so it's going to be interesting to hear more from you and from some of the other panels about how a global partnership might be able to help build that ecosystem. So now we're going to turn to questions for you and from you. And so Jessica is going to open up a link for you to answer a question that we have about I've lost the question. Let's see. Based on your own experience and what you've heard, we'd like to understand what some of the challenges that you or your organization face in building capacity for monitoring and evaluation. So follow the link in the chat and tell us, and this is for all participants to participate in. And please make your answers brief because we're going to display the most frequent terms in a word cloud. And so we'll also be moving to your opportunity to ask questions of Allison, Hippolina, and Candace. But first, we just wanted to hear, based on what you've heard and what you've lived, what are your challenges? Turnover, staff, lack, politics, resources. So training is still an issue, funding, methodologies, data. Keep them coming because we'd love to save this information. Understanding. I'd love to hear more when we go to the questions about unrealistic, because this is a big dream. And so what do we need to do to make it realistic? And I see in the chat, Julie has said buy-in from the whole team. So part of it is building capacity, but part of it is convincing and persuading. More commitment and ownership. Yes, Nino, I agree. This is great. Jessica, I think we'll stop there. And if you could put the speak up link in the app, let's just take a few minutes to let participants ask questions that they may have for Hippolina, Allison, or Candace. So a link will be coming for you to go to a site where you can enter your questions. There it is in the chat. And in Phoenix, I do believe the session is being recorded. It's also live on Facebook. So if you sign up for the IPDET newsletter, we can make sure that the recording is available. And Jason has also answered the question. Are you able to, so just to clarify, when you go to the Speak Up app, there's the code beneath 45609 in Jessica's chat that you will need to enter in order to join the room. So we have 2 questions so far, and I think I'll ask this first question for brief answers from each of the panelists. How do we get to sustained commitment? What are your experiences of commitment over time? So Hippolina, would you be willing to take that question first about sustaining the commitment?
Yes, thank you very much, Brenda. One of the things we have found, I think I'm going to look at commitments on 2 levels. Within our construct, what we find is, first of all, in terms of commitment to M&E, is that many program managers believe that M&E is a separate function. While we do have it as a separate function, there is a level of M&E that has to be undertaken as part of the program. So I think we need to have that level of commitment. And also in terms of the wider commitment, I think the importance of M&E in providing evidence-based information and data to inform policy. I think the more we can provide this data through M&E, the more this data can be translated into policy, the more commitment I think there will be in terms of providing resources and ownership of M&E. So I think I'm looking at it from 2 levels, and commitment has to come from both levels. Thank you very much.
That's a good point, that part of building the commitment is proving the value. So very interesting. And Candace, when in the governments that you've worked with, what have you seen them do that works to sustain commitment to this agenda?
Thank you, Brenda. So I want to echo what Hippolina said as well. And to add to that is that there needs to be some sort of demand. And we discovered that, you know, you can go into working with governments and introduce what you have to offer. But if the demand is not generated somehow from some, and it doesn't have to be the demand from the entire system, but it must be located somewhere. It's better, of course, if the demand is located strategically. So, for example, in a prime minister's office, or the presidency, or, you know, national development planning commissions and so forth. But the demand, if it's there, it is just so much easier to get that commitment, because then you move from that demand to co-creating then and understanding what sorts of partnerships you can have to bring together your expertise, and to look at recruiting other forms of expertise that perhaps don't exist in your organization. And this is where I want to talk about the fact that a global initiative is so important, because not a single organization can bring all of the expertise or all of the technical support that the government might need. And so you really need to draw on your partners to say, okay, this is how this need has been defined. Perhaps we don't have this particular set of expertise, but will you partner with us to co-create what the solution could be in this space? So once you work to that, point of internal ownership, the demand, and then internal ownership, and you move then towards institutionalization, those 3 aspects together, sustains actually the way the system, even beyond, for example, in an electoral system, beyond a particular, leadership that's been in place for a while. If you have it institutionalized, it actually sustains beyond that. And that's been from our experience, that the demand, the internal ownership and institutionalization is actually what sustains the commitment over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Candace. And Alison, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to add another question that has come in, which is, again, about commitment, but then also, how do you get governments to care more about outcomes, not just outputs? So 5 people have voted that they want to hear the answer to that too. So if I can give those both to you.
Great, thanks, Brenda, and great questions. So I think just to reinforce and echo both what Hippolina said and Candace, I think there are some really essential ingredients for building more sustained commitment to this agenda. It would be wrong of us, I think, to say that we know exactly how to do that everywhere, and that we're still very much in the mode of learning, understanding as we go. But I think the essential ingredients include setting out that enabling environment, the kind of authorizing environment in which evidence and independent evidence is recognized to be important and valuable. It's also about creating a sense of payoff to political representatives, payoff to decision makers, that having this evidence available helps them do a better job. It also matters in terms of sustaining commitment that there's a strong sense of ownership with it, amongst officials, amongst those working in national authorities and local authorities that this actually is a valuable way of understanding how to do things better. And access, openness and access to information is also a crucial part, I think, of building that sense of commitment to the agenda. And the institutional form that takes can vary from country to country, but I think it's really important that those ingredients are all in place. In terms of outcome orientation, I mean, I think this is a massive challenge across government systems, across international organizations everywhere. But without doubt, I think being able to again set this authorizing environment that we care about ultimately impacts on people, we care about how our policy decisions, our spending decisions are driving towards those bigger outcomes, and we put in place systems for monitoring and evaluating our progress towards those. And that can be done, through establishing national systems for evaluation, monitoring and evaluation, but also local systems. It can also involve engaging private sectors and civil society organizations in building an evidence base around and an understanding about what it means to drive towards and achieve outcomes. I think outcome orientation is something that can be worked through how budgets are put together. It can also be worked through how parliaments hold governments to account. So there are lots of different ways into this agenda, but I do think fundamentally that if we're going to make progress on outcomes, we need to make progress on having the tools for monitoring and evaluation well embedded into government systems.
Excellent, thank you so much. So we have about 2 more minutes till we're going to the next panel, and I want to get a couple more questions in. So I'm going to merge a couple of questions that have gotten a lot of votes and ask whichever one of you wants to answer to unmute yourself and answer, Candace, Allison, or Hippolina. So there was one question about COVID and the need for more innovation in M&E so that we can address the current environment that we're working in. And then there was another question about technology and how we can better use technology. And I know those are 2 separate questions, but in the interest of getting as many questions to you as possible, does one of you want to answer the question about how in this unique moment in the world that we're living in, can we bring more innovation and more technology into doing our work better?
I'll have a go at it, Brenda, thank you. And this is a big question, right? And the fact that I'm being brave to have a go at it doesn't mean I've got the answer, but more, around the fact that I actually thought about this question when I was thinking about preparing for this. I sort of knew that it would come up somehow. And, of course, we've got a number of global crises happening. Of course, the climate crisis, the major one, along with the pandemic, and the economic crisis and the fallout from that. And so it's now about saying the old ways and the old methods will no longer work. And monitoring and evaluation traditionally has been a kind of, setting up the system over gathering the evidence over a long period of time, making sure that you've got the bureaucratic machinery in place to do all these things. But now we've got these crises happening, and we've got to very, very rapidly be able to provide, the kinds of information and data that can allow decision makers to take rapid action. So for me, the answer is that we all have to work together. There isn't a single, sometimes we live and work in these silos and say our particular brand of evidence is the best and this is what is going to provide the panacea and the solution. I think what this is saying to us is we have to go across these silos and work across and say, to the data scientists and the evidence people and the M&E people and all of us who are actually working together to the same outcome, to say how can we make sure that in this epoch of the Anthropocene that we don't kill ourselves off and that we make sure that lives actually become better. How do we work together to rapidly scale up? And I think that it's about saying, how do we do that? I think that's the difficulty. I think it's most of us have the will and the thinking and the impetus to do that. It's just that we are so locked in the old ways of doing things. I'm hoping that us moving towards talking about working globally, in a new initiative that will help us to form these partnerships will move us in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. That was the perfect setup for our second panel. So even though we didn't plan it, it's really good because our second panel is going to be talking about how global collaboration can address today's need. And so why don't I just turn to the second panel now, which will be Stephanie, Rossetti, and Patricia, and start the conversation with them. And Steffi, I'd like to start with you. How is IPDET expanding beyond its in-person program in Bern to decentralized activities? And how does this open up opportunities for engagement and knowledge sharing with wider audiences?
Yes, thank you, Brenda, and thank you for this interesting discussion we just had. And I would like to continue with maybe first linking to the topic of this session, namely the new global initiative on evaluation. That's why we're all here, right? And IPDET is a part of this global initiative on evaluation, and it sees itself as a part of a global community on evaluation. And so also from my side, first of all, congratulations to IEG, the World Bank, to start this effort to have this global community developed. And because what are we facing for years? Everybody knows evaluation, its function is important, it's gaining in its importance. By now, everybody knows evaluation capacity development is more than just a training. So there are a lot of different training providers all over the world. Quite some good evaluation capacity development is taking place. But so far, it's kind of intransparent. By chance, you know about other trainings. You know, okay, how can we expand the individual capacity development and so on. So all these kind of questions we're also facing at IPDET, right? So, and I always say IPDET is more than just a training, right? And now I refer directly to your question, Brenda. First of all, a global partnership, what does that mean? I think it has different levels, right? First of all, you can have global partnerships by delivering and offering trainings or in general in evaluation capacity development, and you can team up with others to have to create more synergies and to have better offers which suit the need of the target groups. But at the end, it's all a partnering of those who are engaged in evaluation and in using evaluations. So now coming back to IPDET, IPDET's heart is still in Bern, right? The 3 weeks delivery in Bern, but still here again, we partner on different levels, in different ways. We partner, for example, with some CLEAR centers, with UNDP. They are engaged as instructors. Candace was an instructor in the core course, and together we developed further the content. So already here, it's important to engage a variety of instructors from different regions because they bring in local knowledge, and so we can engage with the audience in a much better way. And here the audience plays a crucial role, of course, because when they all come to Bern, they come from different parts of the world. They work in different organizations, in different positions, but they all meet in Bern and learn together, they work together, they exchange, and they network, and they network beyond the Bern program. So it's great to see that our alumni community is growing and growing and still learning and engaging with each other. So that's IPDET in Bern. We also teamed up with Patricia Rogers with Better Evaluation. We use it as a source in the core course. And we engage different evaluation associations or international initiatives like EvaLUs, and we provide an open space for them to meet and engage others. So it already started here, right? So now this year, we could not deliver the program in Bern, obviously. After the first shock, as you can imagine, I said, oh my God, what do we do? Just set up another virtual program. We said, yeah, we want to do that, but we want to do it kind of differently. And we want to do it in a very participatory way. So now we are in the third IPDET mini-series. As you can see, many different people are participating in the panel, but also it's an open audience. And then we had this unique first ever evaluation hackathon. We implemented already in July together with Eval Youth and also with Patricia with Better Evaluation. So that was the most participatory way where you can imagine where you grow a community and where you not only we partnered with international initiatives, but we kind of partnered with all participants, right? So we received so much feedback from the people where I said, thank you so much for this global experience. And they engaged very actively in this event and worked so hard with people from all over the world. So I think that was a very, very good example where I said, okay, you engage the global community, they work actively, and they create something very, very innovative. So, and then, of course, we want to take those experiences we make right now from this virtual program, with the mini-series, with the hackathon, with the online workshops, and so on. So we intend to combine that from next year on with our on-site program. We can reach a much wider audience. Obviously, not everybody can come to Bern. And that makes us possible to have a wider audience, people from countries we would not be able to reach. We can engage them much more actively. So that's one part. And then in our regionalization strategy, we are starting to implement next year, hopefully.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just if you could wrap up in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, we will team up. Sorry, that's my last point. And then we will team up with institutions in different countries to better serve the local needs and the context where the demand we recognize in those different countries. So it's all this set up, and we're looking forward to that. And I think that the international evaluation community, which will grow out of that, where we combine forces, we team up with partners, we have synergies worldwide. I think that serves well the purpose of strengthening evaluation capacity.
Thank you, Stephanie. And it sounds like you're already moving in the direction of this initiative with partnering and with lots of other M&E experts and functions. So I'd like to now turn to Rossetti. Welcome, Rossetti. Thank you for joining us. And I would like to hear from you about how we can ensure that both local context and global expertise are readily accessible to M&E professionals, but also to other stakeholders and decision makers. We don't hear you. No.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you.
Okay, please.
So Patricia, from Better Evaluation, how can global collaboration on curating and sharing knowledge help M&E professionals and stakeholders around the world improve their work and bring global knowledge to local contexts?
Thank you. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking from the traditional lands of the Wachabolek, Jadwa, Jadwajali, Wergiya and Yapadyalk people, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm actually speaking to you from Australia this evening, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And I'm looking forward to the rest of what Rossetti has to say, because I think her reality check is really where we need to speak. We are, you know, at a historic moment where we are facing potential disaster globally and potential recovery in a way that's not just building back the same, but building back better and building back different. And I really hope that that's also the same for evaluation, because I think in the same way that the pandemic has shown the cracks in our society, it's also shown the cracks in our evaluation practice, that too often evaluation has not been useful enough. Come on, let's really face it. You know, people are not always really excited. They see the evaluation reports too late. They see the monitoring indicators as not being relevant. You know, we really need it to be better. And I think as a profession or a practice or a field, we often really haven't paid enough attention to the potential harm that we can cause by not doing our work well. It's not just the opportunity cost of wasting people's time and money on us, but the real risk that we give bad information and people make worse decisions and things get worse. So, you know, this is a historic time for us, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be part of a global collaboration around this. And I looked back on a paper I wrote 20 years ago about a vision for evaluation in the future. And it said by 2010, the whole world will be evaluating. Okay, so we're 10 years too late, but you know, we'll make it now. We've got a chance to build this. And when I talked about the whole world, it wasn't just, you know, different countries, it was different languages. And I noticed people talking about the issue that we're speaking in English at the moment, and we need to be much more accessible in different languages is one thing. Obviously we need to do more work on, myself included, and different sectors and disciplines and paradigms and insights. You know, it's not just people who call themselves evaluators who do evaluation, and we need to be learning from these range of sectors. Candice talked about the different people who are in disciplines that we are doing evaluations and who have methods and insights that we need to learn from, and they might learn from us as well in terms of the practice. So I think ways that we can be increasing the learning is important, and that learning is going to come in different ways. Sometimes it will be knowledge transfer. There's a new idea or something that's new to you, you can pick it up and run with it, and you might be able to just learn it yourself, or you might go to a training course, or you might work in a community of practice, but you can basically learn to do this new thing, and some of it's like that. A lot of it, though, I think is going to be about knowledge translation. We're going to need to say, how do I do that in my context? Because even technical processes have people involved and need to be done in different ways, and sometimes the technical issues are different as well. So how do we not just learn one way to do things, but how to adapt it, and what's a good way? How do we learn from people who absolutely challenge us and help us see blind spots in our way of thinking about evaluation and our the assumptions that we make about what evaluation looks like and how we do it, and how can we learn more about the consequences of the choices we make in evaluation and our practice, so we can make better choices. And fundamentally, how do we actually document and share those lessons learned? We often see in evaluation reports something called lessons learned, and it's often not lessons learned. It's something someone wrote down that it would be good if people learned these. So how do we do the same in evaluation? And so before I answer your question directly, I guess I was reflecting on some of the key some pivotal moments when I learned something from my practice. Brenda, how much time I forgot to check when I jumped in. Have I got
You really only have 1 minute, because I would like to go back to Rossetti and make time for questions and answers.
Sure. So of the 4 stories I'd like to tell, I'll tell one of them. So, you know, one of the examples, I guess, for me is something about around rubrics and global scales, to say, rather than assessing performance by single indicators, maybe we need scales that really allow us to examine all the dimensions of performance and draw on a range of data in a systematic and empirical way. And rubrics are a way to do that. And there's been a whole suite of examples generated from a group of evaluators, many of them in New Zealand and Seattle, who've been sharing examples of it, and seeing multiple examples of that is incredibly helpful for people to think about how they can adapt that in different ways. So better evaluation is really a way to curate information that's already available that gets lost. People do a fabulous conference presentation and then it disappears. how do we curate and these things, share them, the things people want to share? How do we help co-create new documents of evidence, document these wonderful insights that people have, and also document the consequences of the different choices and share that. So Better Evaluation has information on hundreds, literally hundreds of evaluation methods and processes and approaches, and we're refining that at the moment, particularly looking at the challenges in the pandemic and what that means, not just for data collection, but all the aspects of evaluation. But for that to really work needs global partnerships. We need people to be not just using it in the one end as IPDET and other courses are doing, but also contributing to it, and contributing to it from their experience of local practice and what that means. So I'm just really delighted to be part of this this collaboration. I think the moment is now, and I really look forward to the next stages. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And I think global evaluation is such an important part of the whole, because we talk about generating the knowledge, collecting the knowledge, gathering the knowledge. And so it's wonderful to have them as part of this partnership. And then I'd like to hear from Rossetti about that piece you talked about, knowledge translation, right? So how do we have all this wonderful knowledge that we've gathered, but then translate it to make it make sense in a local context? So let's try to go back to Rossetti, and Patricia, maybe during the Q&A we can get to some of your other 3 stories. But let's try to go back to Rossetti and hear from her about the connection between local context and global knowledge.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, it's a bit of an echo, so there, go. We don't hear you, Rossetti. Rossetti, you're on mute. I can see there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for the challenges. East Africa is busy with the rains. And I was saying that we need to do a reality check on what we are discussing, because things are a little bit different in the way they are turning out in the M&E space. National governments are actually changing. National governments are changing the way they are allocating funds, and because of the COVID-19. And due to that, you find that the budget lines which supported a monitoring and evaluation, especially allowances, facilitating field work, and travel consultants for evaluation, have all been kind of scraped away, and funds turned into other areas which support the pandemic. And the pandemic is not going to go away for a very long time. And so we have to rethink, because it means the policymakers, especially in Africa, are looking for what works in a very short time. It's no longer a good thing to go out and start looking for evidence for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, trying to analyze things. It's no longer fashionable for the policymakers, especially in the public sector. And that means M&E is going to be affected. Even ECD development must take into account that we have social distancing, and it's going to take a long time. If you have social distancing, it means that I cannot go to talk to partners about what is going on in terms of doing an evaluation. And maybe it will be a call, but how credible is that call? So it means we have to find innovation, new tools of work, new methodologies of how do you gather evidence and bring it very, very quickly. And the ECD must quickly turn around, and we move away from doing things for a very long time, training people. For instance, the question that was asked about outcomes and outputs. In the documentation all over Africa, everybody everybody is looking for outcomes, and we have moved to program-based budgeting and planning. But then, in reality, Africa is going through an electoral process in most of the countries. And when you are doing elections, you are more concerned about outputs than outcomes. And therefore, it means that whatever monitoring or evaluation is done, someone wants to see something which is tangible. And this discussion of outcomes is far-fetched from a politician. And therefore, when you are discussing issues of outputs, outcomes, we must be cognizant that the wheels are turning back. How do we then do global partnerships that bring digital systems closer to the evaluators, train people to work fast and in innovative ways, use existing data so that we don't have to go back to collect new data, because you are not allowed at the moment to do that. So I would like to say we need to go back and answer the questions from a different perspective. In fact, we want uniquely tools that are unique to context, because now countries are inward looking. They are inward looking and saying, I don't have the resources, my people are dying. So the kind of evaluation, first of all, some of them are saying, you evaluators, you evaluated and we took your recommendations, but then nothing changed. Why should we trust you? Nothing changed. We took every single letter you said, this is what it should be. But at the end of using the evaluation findings, the situation was worse. So is this evaluation really working? Is it relevant? So these questions have started coming up in Africa. I thank you so much. And I can't go away without saying we have started preparing the African Evaluation Conference, the 10th one in March in Ethiopia next year. And this discussion should be one of those that we would welcome for you to bring on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rossetti. And tell us the dates of the African Evaluation Conference in Ethiopia. What are the dates in March, do you know? You're muted, but I tell you what, we'll be sure to post that information in the IPDET newsletter. We can't hear you now.
We are planning. We are planning for 8th of March, and we continue to hope that we can do a combination of virtual and physical. Ethiopia never closed its borders, but they say COVID is there. So all of us are watching the space to see what happens exactly. And we are looking for contributors, we are looking for donors, we are looking for people who are interested so that we work together. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll all put it on our calendars March 8th, and if you decide to go virtual, I'm sure you can talk to Steffi to learn from her experiences in taking IPDET virtual as well. So now we have about 20 minutes left in our program, 19 minutes to be precise, and we're going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is ask Jessica to put the link for the next set of questions. There's going to be another Speak Up link in the chat where you can contribute questions. We're going to start curating those questions now as we turn to Oscar for some summarizing remarks. So you can't use the link that you used before. There's a new link with a new room code for Speak Up. So start thinking about questions that you have for Patricia, Rossetti, Stephanie, and Oscar, and put them in there, and I'll take a look at them after we hear from Oscar Garcia from UNDP. So Oscar, welcome. Thank you for being here. And I just want to have you wrap us up and tell us about your perspective on this global partnership and UNDP's role.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Brenda. It's a real pleasure for me and for UNDP Independent Evaluation Office to be part of this global coalition and to be preceded by such a stellar panel. Honestly, a privilege to be among all of you. So many good questions were posed today. Starting about what kind of evidence do we need? And not just what kind of evidence, but also for whom. And Candice was really spot on in terms of saying, we should not forget that what we aim is really to improve people's lives, improving people's lives. And therefore, all this architecture that we are building should be really driven by the changes that we may affect in improving people's lives. And then what type of capacities exist in our countries, in different countries? And what type of capacities do we need? And is there really a gap, an expertise gap? And how do we feel? And I think the question that you posed in terms of what are the challenges when the words were coming in was very telling of the reality of so many quarters around the globe. And one of them was understanding the role of monitoring and evaluation can have to improve the quality of decision making, of policies, and ultimately of people's lives. But for that, we also identify some other challenges, including politics and the lack of commitment or buy-in from decision makers. And Patricia was really very, very incisive when she said, evaluations are not used enough. How can we better link the users of evaluation with the people who are conducting evaluation? And IPDET and so many other platforms are a good space for bringing this dialogue together among the people who need to use evaluations and the people who are producing these evaluations. And therefore, this sustained commitment for evaluation, as Alison said, we do have many ingredients. The recipe might be different according to the national institutional setup. However, the ingredients were already mentioned, and I think that is very, very important for us to know that this ownership and access. And now, allow me to give to that reflection a bit of UNDP's perspective. UNDP has been really supporting national monitoring and evaluation systems for a long time. And we know how important training is, but our emphasis has been more on the systems themselves. How do we create a demand and a supply for evaluation systemically? One that really makes the use of evaluation impacting the quality of our policies. And I think we all recognize that COVID-19 is posing a number of challenges for us, revealing the inequities of our current development pathways. And therefore, we still see COVID-19 as an opportunity to rethink our approach to evaluation and identify innovative ways of conducting evaluations. And in our perspective, the monitoring and evaluation systems that we want to institute, they will be sustained if we ensure more citizens' participation. We need to bring the citizens and really the beneficiaries of so many development initiatives into the design and the feedback loops in order to see how evaluation is really useful to change their lives. And now technology really allows for a better participation, and the COVID-19 again has showed the importance of digitalization. And unfortunately, this is perhaps widening some gaps that already exist in terms of access to technology. However, now we are aware that we can address those issues and try to build these systems in a more inclusive and participatory manner so that they can be more sustained, and using them as an opportunity for innovation. And there are many pointers that you have mentioned of how innovations are already taking place and can further be shared in this global community. And UNDP is really delighted to be part of this with our extended country presence and our commitment to support national evaluation capacities. Over to you, Brenda.
Thank you very much, Oscar. We're really excited that UNDP is part of the partnership as well. Reminder to all participants to follow that new Speak Up link that Matt has shared with the room number to enter your questions, enter your comments, vote on questions that others have submitted that you'd like to see answered. Oscar, I'm actually going to direct the first question to you. And I think it's an interesting one, which is, how is this partnership going to create new opportunities for M&E professionals?
Absolutely. First of all, we have realized that we can do more together than alone, right? And so that's why with Alison and the colleagues of IEG, UNDP has partnered, and we are rallying a great deal of support also from bilaterals, and not just international development institutions, but also academics, practitioners, and I would say colleagues from around the world, including evaluators. So this creates great opportunity for knowledge sharing. And I'm glad that Patricia is with us, because the platform of better evaluation, as she says, really curates knowledge about what is working and what is working in which context. And therefore, I think this global community creates a great opportunity for knowledge sharing, but also for change. Because inevitably, we will be able to translate that knowledge into what our own realities need in whatever part of the globe we are. And that translation role of curating this knowledge in a way that is really more conducive to better results, development results for improving people's lives, is a responsibility of every evaluator. And so I think it's important that we go beyond just an academic exercise, an intellectual exercise, and embed into the political economy of conducting evaluations. It is, of course, a technical expertise required, but it's not rocket science. But we need to be aware, really, what are we doing and what are the consequences, intended and unintended consequences of our evaluation practice. And this global platform is really a great example of how walking together we can go much farther.
Thank you, Oscar. Can you hear me? I'm getting a message here. So that's very helpful. And I want to then shift to Rossetti, because the other side of that equation is convincing policymakers and governments to build national M&E systems. And so this is a question that has gotten a lot of votes on our question system. So Rossetti, might you tell us what will it take to convince governments that they really need to invest in national M&E systems?
Thank you very much. This is not a very easy question, what it takes, because first of all, even within governments, there is turnover now of exactly who is in government. People who have been trained before have moved on or have been displaced because governments cannot afford to have a very big wage bill at a time when we have COVID-19. And therefore, first of all, we have to go back and understand we have done M&E policies. Why did we do them? We established systems. And today when you check, if I'm in Uganda, when I check, nobody talks about the policy other than the analysts and the people who are doing technical work like evaluators. Nobody mentions the M&E policy. Nobody is concerned, apart from the voluntary association itself, the VOPEs. And I think as we go forward, we need to put more emphasis, first of all, on the young and emerging evaluators who are more energetic and have new knowledge, and combine that with the VOPEs and get these people to start bringing the voice back into the governments to show exactly why evaluation is important. The culture needs to be built back, because now when you are talking about convincing, you must be where the others are. You don't go and analyze and do evaluation on energy when everybody else is in health. And so you must be relevant to the context within which the evaluation is done. Some SDGs are just going to fall by the way around this time, and others are going to have more prominence. So let's go where the prominence is and start from there and show that evaluation has an important point to play in the health system, in the water system. And then you move backwards, and we then make sure the trainings, the capacity building enables us to have the right values in the evaluators who are actually undertaking this type of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rossetti. That's an excellent point. And I think it's worth noting for the partnership that, as you've said, engaging young and emerging evaluators, engaging VOPEs to help be the advocates with governments for the importance of this initiative is probably a key role that the partnership can contribute to. Patricia, I wonder if maybe one of your other 3 stories relates to this question that has come online, which is COVID yet again, and how can we use the COVID opportunity to transform evaluation?
Well, I mean, there's already a lot of thinking and writing and sharing and work on this going on, and that's something that we are really keen to be drawing together, in which we're doing in a series. And one of the things we're doing is looking systematically at the different aspects of evaluation, because it's very easy to think, what does it mean for data collection? Because that was the first thing people thought about. Oh, I can't do my field visits, and that's true. And there's a lot of stuff around that. But there's a lot of stuff on every aspect of it. And what's been fascinating for me has been learning about massive adaptation that's going on. So people working in government who are looking at how do we do rapid turnaround evaluations that answer questions about, are these innovations in service delivery that are addressing social distancing and isolation being effective, and how do we do that with a rapid turnaround? So you've got different types of questions, you've got different types of governance in how you manage the evaluation. You're using different ways of answering causal questions, because long time frame stuff is not going to work, and you don't want to skip that, and really thoughtful approaches to synthesis and reporting and supporting use. So the whole gamut of it, I think there's some fabulous work going on there, and part of what we need to do is to pay attention to all the aspects of evaluation, and including the machinery of evaluation itself, and what our policies say and what they require. And I think the other thing in all of this is we have to demonstrate the value of it, not just that we can do evaluation, but that it's worth doing it.
Thank you. And that reminds me of what Hippolina said about, sort of proving in by doing something that is shown to be valuable, and then they will want more. So we have just a few minutes left. There's a question that's come in, and I'm not sure if Steffi will want to take this, or Patricia, if you want to continue with it. So let me put the question out there, and you two can decide who would like to take it, or both of you, which is, one of the things that we know is that most learning happens by doing, right? Of course, knowledge sharing is important. Of course, training is important. But one of the ways that people really go up on their skills, increase their skills, is by doing it, and doing it in a supported way. So how can learning by doing be part of this solution?
Maybe I quickly start, Patricia, and then you can come in, because that is an issue we are discussing at IPDET, and how can we approach this in a realistic way, because as you know, as a training provider, we deliver workshops in Bern, first of all, and now online, and we can go in other different regions, but in Bern it will stay practicing and case studies. But what we intend to do is, when we team up with others in other countries, the idea is also not to provide another training, but eventually do it with a very small group of people and apply an evaluation. So that would work like a mentoring system, whereas, okay, we have face-to-face sessions. We would design the evaluation together. We would design the methods, the instruments, and so on. Then they would apply it by themselves, come back, get some other advice, some more mentoring, and then share it with a wider group, so that the knowledge of this experience would then also come to a higher level. So that's also an idea we are foreseeing. Of course, we cannot do it everywhere. We have to focus, but we would like to combine this with supporting young and emerging evaluators. So at the same time that they would come into practice.
That's really exciting. Thank you, Steffi. Patricia, did you want to add to?
Just very briefly, I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think as part of this collaboration and partnership, we really need to be looking at how to support some existing initiatives that are already in place around mentoring, around communities of practice, and how to support new ones to be in there. You know, one of the things that I think we often don't do enough of is provide that peer review or expert review opportunity. I'm trying something new. Could you please have a look at my data collection instrument? Could you please have a look at my plan for how I'm going to do this? That peer review, and often it's the VOPEs, it's the evaluation associations do that formally or informally. I think that's it's a very important area for us to look at in this partnership.
Thank you, Patricia. Well, it is 8:29 and that 90 minutes went really quickly. I really want to say thank you to Allison, Oscar, Hippolina, Candace, Stephanie, Rossetti, and Patricia. This was a really good conversation. I am more convinced than ever that this global initiative on evaluation is needed and that we've got a lot of good brains in the room. It's also important that everyone who's on this call participate, because to make it the kind of partnership that is going to meet this challenge, we need everybody's brains in this creation stage. And at this point, what we have is the IPDET newsletter. I think Jessica or Matt can put the link in the chat, and that will be one way that you can stay in touch with us and be involved as we move forward with building out this global partnership. But thanks to all of our panelists, thanks to all the participants. Au revoir, merci beaucoup. It has been wonderful, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, everyone.